why do you feel the relevance of B-schools still remains?
Don't do an MBA. And I've said it point blank. There's this element of FOMO also amongst the younger generation.
The fascination with MBA majorly is also about the LPA, that you're gonna get like a huge package.
Being very, very real on what to expect. I think give that near year time frame, you'll definitely do well.
If it's a good startup, there will be people who will teach them, give them things to do.
And the best thing, right, about startup, you don't have a job description as such.
Before even managing students, it's difficult to manage teachers.
You really don't need.
Welcome Ajitesh to AP Podcast. It's a real pleasure to have someone from the background of both education and leadership. Both of these things are those things I personally feel that requires like laser focus, especially in a developing country like India, where you are like building so many things at parallel. You have to see things which really sets the foundation, and I think teaching and your leadership both plays a vital role there. So having a person from that background, that too with such a robust resume, CV or profile, you say, that's real amazing. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I think I look forward to discussing a lot of interesting things about the education sector, about what's happening in the country.
Yeah. I really want to pick this conversation from the most heated debate at the moment, that is startup or MBA. Personally, now experiencing that sort of genre of life, but at the moment, when I ever see a startup or any person who has been into a startup for an year or 6 months, it feels like legit MBA with steroids, because you are learning too quickly. You are learning so many things at such a small scale of time. You would be required to do one thing. In an MNC, you might take like a 3 months, 4 months time to do that particular thing, but in a startup, you might do that in a week or something. So there are many crazy things like that. So in the era of emerging startups, why do you feel the relevance of B schools still remains?
That's a very loaded question, and to be very honest, though I am in the education space,
Yeah.
people have asked me this, and I've been very blunt, and I've said, given a choice, take that risk, get into a startup. Don't do an MBA. And I've said it point blank, like I don't even hesitate to tell people to go out there, work, get your hands dirty. See, you can always do an MBA, right? You can always do it at different points in your life. You can have a very different career growth trajectory, and then suddenly you feel, I feel I've stagnated, and then you can jump into an MBA and then come out of it doing really well. So, I mean, most of it has to do with culture and history. India as a country, right? We've always given so much importance to education that they've really never questioned when you do an MBA or is it really required. And it's become more of a status thing, like, oh, I've done an MBA, I want to do an MBA, or you feel even there's this element of FOMO also amongst the younger generation. So they're like, oh, I just got out of college, but let me also finish my master's and then I'll be done with my studies for now. That kind of a mindset has always been there. But given a choice, for the longest time, I believed, startup is such a risky place to be in, mainly because of the numbers, right? Like if you look at the percentage of startups that have failed, if you look at the average age of that entrepreneur, it really doesn't add up to a young 21-year-old getting into a startup. So I have consciously been very careful when it comes to telling students to get into a startup. And one, you need to have a bit of clarity once you get into it. And if you don't have that clarity, for the sake of doing a startup and for saying that, I think it's this cool thing because I saw these guys doing something on Shark Tank, and then you also want to replicate what they're doing. It's a very bad idea.
Yeah.
Your intent to start something has to be very genuine. And of course, if
Yeah.
students or a young 18, 19-year-old has that mindset of, I really will play this long game. When I say long game, I mean minimum of 10 years. Are you ready to put in that time, effort? Then you get into it. Like, you're in the right place. Build a team, build a company, do it slowly. There's no formula that, you have to do this, you have to do that. Yes, you will fail. You will feel like you're failing every day. But then the whole point is that, and the whole point is to survive and push through. So, very, very honestly, if somebody has that passion, that drive, and that edge, and of course that resilience, I would say, what, do it as early as you can in your life, because looking back 10 years, 15 years, you'll definitely not regret anything, right? MBA is
Yeah,
something that you can
certainly.
do. You don't have to be like of a certain age. If you go abroad, you'll have people where the average class of an MBA is 32 or 33. These are guys who've had a bunch of experience, and then they come in, and then they can actually relate to a lot of what happens at work and in classrooms. So I think that's the actual purpose of doing an MBA. And but unfortunately or fortunately, India has always believed that the MBA is something that, I just have to get that degree and move forward and whatever, build a career after that.
Yeah, and certainly certainly feel you there that the fascination with MBA majorly is also about the LPA, that you're gonna get like a huge package. That once you have done the MBA, some big company is gonna come and pick you. So I also feel that MBA is sort of seen as a degree to just earn money. Maybe not the skills. Like, how many people you will find in India who are willing to do an MBA to actually learn for the sake of it. So that's also there.
Yeah, 100%. India has always chased those numbers. Parents have always looked at them, your colleagues, your peers, your classmates, whatever you want. Everybody looks at numbers because it's such a metric that kind of it reduces your entire identity to, he's gotten a package at XYZ company at 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs. So hence this must be a good institute to go study in. The reality is, of course, a lot different. And as long as we don't romanticize the idea of, the pay packages, why I want to do an MBA for, I think we're in a good place. But that has to shift. Today, every B school, they're so fixated, because one of the first questions that you see, right, of applicants, especially catist, I think catist today, so the guys who come out of these institutions and they want to get into an MBA, they're always thinking, how do I ensure that I get a 30 lakh package? How do I ensure that I get into this particular organization? And it's always good to have a goal, there's nothing wrong in having that goal and saying that, I want to be aspirational. But being aspirational and a bit of taking your realistic nature is also helpful in navigating the world, because you need to know the people you're competing against also. Whether you like it or not, competition does exist. And I believe that, if that's just one variable, and it doesn't define you completely. There are instances where individuals have gotten into very good companies, but at a very, very low pay package. But then it hasn't taken them long to get up there, and the linear growth as such was actually there. It's not stagnated. So really, if you have a long-term view on getting that job and being very, very real on what to expect, I think give that 10-year, 5-year time frame, you'll definitely do well. Rather than just going
Yeah,
behind.
certainly. Yeah, and I think even if it's about the skill set, those people who are not that much well equipped with skills, if they decide to be part of a startup rather than starting a startup, still they are going to learn anyway, because they will be in a position where they will be challenged again and again. And if it's a good startup, there will be people who will teach them, give them things to do. And I think pragmatic way to learning is something that really sticks with you forever.
Yeah, yeah. And the best thing, right, about startups,
Yeah,
you don't really have like a
exactly.
KRA or you don't have a job description as such. I mean, you may have it on paper, but then
Yeah.
you're technically doing everything. You're actually doing everything, and I think that's the best way to learn about business. And
Yeah.
uh, but if you're getting into a job, you're so confined to your job role and your KRAs and KPIs. You're like, I'm only going to stick to this. I'm not going to do anything else because that's what people tell you to do. So I think that advantage is something that people should, I mean, they should look at it as an advantage, not as, oh, I'm having too much to do. And if you look at it through that lens, you'll really understand that it's really your personal MBA in its way.
Yeah. And even broadly speaking about Indian education system, I really want to ask you this. You yourself are in an environment where you on daily basis meet students and talk to them, and you see a lot of people applying at your college, and even as a whole also in the nation. We are too much focused on memorization, that how much you can remember and then how much of that you can write, barring few degrees who which requires you to think about something which is basically arts, and you just write your criticism about it. But overall, when you go to technical degrees, it's usually like this, that you are required to like memorize everything happening around you and then just jolt it down whatever you have. So when you see this aspect of Indian education, how do you see that?
So this is again, it's something so deep because it's not like we can change it overnight. This needs systemic change. So when I say systemic change, it has to start
Yeah.
from school, because you know um, all these all these students have come from a background where they've been told from grade 1 to grade 12, you have to memorize, you have to remember the important questions, you have to know the previous year question papers and answers, practice it, only then you'll score. So that mindset, to shift it overnight is extremely difficult. And we have faced it too. Like, for instance, the first semester, especially, students come with this thought that I need to score, I need to get my l- last 3 years question papers, and only then will I be able to do well. And we have realized, yeah, so I'll give you a small insight, right? Like, we became autonomous recently, and being autonomous, we don't usually it's all our own. Our question paper setting is by ourselves, and evaluation happens in-house. So the unique thing that we found during results was there were a lot of failures in that first semester. Then we were figuring out why, and it's also because there's no history. We didn't have any previous year question papers to give students. And then they realize that students are so dependent on this, and they have to kind of get out of that mindset of I need these. They look at it as crutches to doing well in exams, and unless that gets out of the way and you don't give that importance to uh, that particular variable of just getting marks, and look at it more towards what am I learning? Am I curious enough to grasp something out of this particular subject? If that doesn't happen, India, everywhere across, doesn't matter which institute, will face this dilemma of whether a student is actually learning or is it just gaming the whole system where he or she knows how to get through it.
And I think, like, if you see that pragmatically, what might make sense, just assuming here, that we introduce new courses. I think people like you who are like actually doing it might be able to put this in practice better. That when you see like these Ivy League colleges, like earlier before the podcast, I was saying that one guy is doing masters in AI engineering, which is sort of a new thing. Like at the moment, everyone wants to be part of AI. They want to include AI in their company, in their website, everywhere they want to have AI. So certainly it is something which has picked up and would be even respected, or a person who knows that would be in a better position to acquire some good positions in future. So overall, how do you see this whole argument? Like, what if we include sort of new curriculums, new degrees itself, which focuses on the thing which is coming up and the things which can be taught with the traditional course that you are having?
100%. There is no right way of doing something. See, the first thing, right, at AVBS or at the institutions that we have to firstly question everything, question the norm. Don't assume because something has been there for so long, it has to continue. Everything is here to get disrupted at some point. It's only a question of when, how, and how quickly we actually do that. And when it comes to looking at different degrees, it has to also make sense to the world. It's very easy to bring out a course and say that, we think this is relevant, but are there companies, are there people who are actually there looking out for somebody like you? If not, then it's a very, very risky area to be in. So the first easiest step is to look at that fit, the market fit, and it's very important to talk to people, very important to understand the macro dynamics of where that fit lies, and then how we can look into getting people to do such a degree. And it's a very simple, supply demand kind of a thing, but at the same time, if you're only looking at employment, that works. But if you're looking at something more long term, where you're expecting students to pick up skills or certain meta skills that help them not just beyond that first job, but job 2, 3, 4, or whatever you want to start something on your own. That's when it plays a very, very crucial role. And for the longest time, I believed if you don't experiment as an institution, you never know the possible outcomes of what your students could be doing. And we've always experimented at different capacities, and I'll say it proudly.
Would you like to would you like to give any primary example of experiments that you have done?
So I'll tell you what we did a couple of years ago, especially with our master's program, the MBA program. So, communication is such a boring module, right? Like, nobody wants to sit in a communication class. What do you do there? You learn grammar and you learn proper diction, and you really don't know how to apply it in the most practical sense. So we said, what, let's remove this whole communication thing, relook at it, and we introduced theatre. We said, we'll make all our students do theatre and management. So you're doing management through theatre.
Wow.
You're learning teamwork, you're learning about leadership, you're learning about negotiation, all of these important things that you do in a B school, but you're doing it through theatre. And then, to be very honest, we took it out as an experiment to see, let's see what happens. But we saw great results immediately. Like a student who couldn't speak a fluent sentence or a structured sentence, that student was able to, crack very good interviews and get placed amongst, and be one of the first to be placed amongst the classmates. So a small example, but that the power of changing certain things and looking at things in a different way, I think it really builds a lot of confidence among students. And we believe, there are areas where subjects you don't need teachers. You don't need teachers. You need to just guide students into that right direction and say that, you know what, figure this out. Let's see what you come out with. And that's the thing about education, right? You can't make everything too structured. The moment you start making things too structured, that's when things get boring. That's when you can almost predict the outcomes with high certainties. And you build a good system, of course, but then do you really get as output great thinkers or people who question? No, you probably won't get that. So I think that's crucial in the kind of experiments that you run in an institution. And it's very important to do it often and not think that, oh, we're already there and we don't need to do anything new. Everyone needs to try it out, irrespective of how big or old you are as an institute.
Certainly, it's not a small example. Including theatre with management is a big thing, honestly. I have seen people, I am from Hindu college, which is like an arts college. So, majorly, people there also might not be so much inclined to do theatre. So, you are making management students like go and do these things, which usually very few people tend to do. So, that's like a real good example, real good effort. That shows effort.
Yeah, it's almost like we had to force them to do it initially, and then now people ask when are the theater
Yeah.
sessions starting? Yeah.
Yeah. And with that, you were also bringing a point about teachers. I really want to ask this to you. So, do you feel that when it comes to overall managing the curriculum, before even managing students, it's difficult to manage teachers because these are those people that are in that niche for like at least a decade. So they are already having their preconceived notions about education and the way they are going to teach, the way they are going to mark people. So it might be difficult on that note. So what do you feel about that?
So this is such a complex thing with the education system in general, because
Mm-hmm.
you have students on one side, and on the other side you have teachers who kind of, what's been happening over the last couple of years or more than that is, what is the role of a teacher today? Is it what it used to be a decade ago, or is he more than a teacher, or is he or she more than a teacher? Like, we've always had this issue, and at the institute level you can do a certain things, like we commonly refer to what we call FDPs, faculty development programs, and these programs have to be really insightful, not do these programs for the sake of doing it and saying that my faculty have learned something, but bring in the industry. How can they actually do something with the industry? It's kind of like going back to work for a teacher and then observing what happens and then bringing that back to class. And UGC has put out certain guidelines on these things where you do give opportunity to your teaching faculty to absorb what happens in the industry and bring that back, and bring that back in different ways. Build your own case studies or build live examples of what happens in reality, and does that actually match with the theory that you teach? Because that's when a faculty feels like, okay, I have something to contribute here, and I feel like I'm doing something important, or I feel like I'm not just teaching a definition of some management principle, or it really makes sense when teachers do that. And today I'll give you an example, right? We had a management professor who really showed a lot of interest in analytics, and naturally a great statistician, good with finance, but he's like, I want to move towards analytics as a domain. And we ensured that that particular teacher was undergoing an upskilling program with Virginia Tech. And the idea was simple. How do we encourage them to do something of relevance so that it actually benefits everyone? So this need not be done at a larger scale. It can always start from even one person. Can you just identify one person and then say that I'll help you do better, or I'll help you get into this domain, I'll help you figure things out, and that can obviously be taken up, and then you make sure that all your faculty at some point are learning something beyond what they've already studied at their B.Ed or their PhDs or whatever. So that becomes knowledge that is applied knowledge. So if it's not applied, the other problem with students is they get bored easily because they have no context, right? Like you have to give them info that is beyond just what you read in regular case studies. You have to give your examples of what you witnessed. That's what makes classes very interesting. And teachers for the longest time, so we had this vision mission. We revisited our vision and mission statements to see where we are as an institute and where we want to go. What happened then was the question came of having one of the requirements of a good institute is, we said, teachers have to be great, or you have to have quality teachers. And then that question came, but then as a nation, we know there's a huge dearth of teachers, number one. And at the second level, there's huge dearth of quality teachers. And the resource element of it is very less. So very few people are actually coming into the teaching profession. And the ones who are, it would make more sense if you're coming with some corporate experience.
Actually,
And
very great point.
UGC
Very great point.
Yeah, so even the UGC has something called Professor of Practice. You essentially get professors, corporate people with 15 plus years of experience, and then you say that, why don't you come and teach? You're not a full-time faculty. It's more like you're there, you're teaching a certain module, and then you get back. So I think these inclusions have kind of helped in, the guidelines have become more flexible for institutions, for teachers also to learn from these different individuals who are coming from the industry. And we see this trend also, right, where individuals have worked extremely hard and they've become extremely successful in that corporate game, and then they realize at some point, it usually happens after 50-20 years of working, I want to give back to society in some form. And then they say, you know what, I just want to go teach. I don't care about anything else. The money is secondary, but I want to somewhere inspire, or I want to somewhere help these younger kids, or help faculty who are struggling with different things. So in a way, right, I think we are going in that right direction. And teachers hopefully realize this potential of what is out there and grab it, instead of being too worried and scared about, what if I don't get anything out of it. So I think that's the right way to look at it, and there's definitely no reason why it would work.
Certainly, that's a very great point, and I'm surprised like many people might not be knowing this UGC guideline that you just mentioned, that a corporate person can be inculcated into a faculty program. That's something that's very rare and should be utilized by institutes. With that, I wanna ask about this whole thing about Indian students having this thought process that they want to go abroad for studies. Like I was reading some data by some organization which was saying that 50% of the students are having these aspirations that they want to go to US, settle there and study there. And this though as a statement the President Trump made like before election, that everyone will get the green card or something once they have done a diploma or stuff. But even if we exclude that part, when you see overall this thing that people, students want to go abroad and get that thing, get that education, get that exposure, that's like they want to leave the country. And the same aspiration you don't see for India. Like you don't see many. There are people, there are students from other countries coming to India, but not as many as US. So when you see things like this happening around you, how do you see that?
So this again, right? When you really look at it, going abroad, when you say US, UK, Australia, wherever it is, it has always been aspirational. See, these are first world countries. We're not talking about countries that don't have the system in place. These are countries that clearly have things in place. And for the longest time, and great institutions have been built in these countries, and there's no denying it. They've done extremely well. They have great faculty. The learning experience is different. But over the years, what's been happening is you see that if you look at it through the lens of return on investment, you spend $100,000, $200,000 to do a 3 or 4 year program, and then end of it you are clueless on whether your degree has any value in the market, or you have no idea where what stands. And today, like even if you look at it through the political lens, things are getting tighter everywhere. Visas are not being given like it used to be given. So you have to know and understand the risks involved. Not to say that people are not applying. More number of people are applying abroad. Everyone feels like there's a better life there. I think it really depends. There's no clear-cut answer here. For instance, I've known people who've done extremely well and are extremely happy living abroad after pursuing their masters or undergrad. But at the same time, I know individuals who have gone there, done that, and then they feel this is not my thing. I need to come back to India. So it really depends where you see yourself, what you see yourself doing, and if you feel that your relevance is more in India, I think you should come back to India, because this is the best time to be here, start a business, work here, because the growth story of India is just beginning, and there is no other country that you can compare India to at the moment when it comes to the growth rate and the kind of progress that we're seeing, despite all the negatives, despite everything, despite the markets being not so great. India is still the preferred destination. So it really depends. And the quick short answer would be, how much are you willing to spend? And if you're willing to spend a lot without that debt element, do it. Go abroad, go for the experience. It is very different. But if you're trying to figure things out and say, I'm going to take a debt and I'll figure it out after I graduate, it's a huge risk element, and you'll get stuck in it, because this is what essentially happened to the US, right? Today, the US has the education debt is close to 2 trillion, if I'm not wrong. And nobody knows how this is going to go away. And you end up paying loans for something that you studied 20 years ago, and you're paying it till you retire, essentially. So that should not be the case when you make a decision when it comes to education, or when it comes to studying abroad. So, but unfortunately, a lot of kids today do have that pressure, peer pressure, and pressure from different people telling them, go to this university, study here, study there.
And I think it's also fair that, if you will go like this, apply for a job there, you will get like an odd job or a boring copy pasting job. Like they don't trust themselves or the things they have done in India. Usually what people feel is that if they have done something in India, it won't be valued in US or something like that. So the only way to go there and make a name for yourself is do an education there.
Yeah, I think that's true. And it's better to do big things in a small company than do small things in a very big company where you're easily replaced. So it's the opportunity cost. I think that's what's important in uh, it's never a bad thing to do something where you're valued and you feel like you're part of something much greater than yourself. And if that's the avenue that you feel that you find abroad, go ahead, do it. But I wouldn't say it's a mandate, or I wouldn't say that the world you'll probably learn everything. You definitely don't. uh, the unique thing I found is the application based learning is very high, and teachers there are more like facilitators. They
Yes.
aren't teachers in their very sense, and they don't judge, right? Like, they don't say i- if you have a point of view, they try to figure out what you're trying to say, and then they question you, and they try to understand what you're trying to say. So the good thing about the system there is you're allowed to fail, you're allowed to make those mistakes, but at the same time you have to figure things out yourself. You have to navigate that journey where it's really not spoon fed in any sense. You'll have
And
to
I
do things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's also about the parenting there. Then it's like a whole other debate when you compare
Yeah.
the whole like cultural dissection of that country like US and India. Then it's like also their parenting. Like they bring up their child like that, that yeah, they have to be independent. They want them to be independent, which is not the case in India usually.
Yeah, I think Western societies have always given that prominence or that importance to individualism, right? Whereas Asian societies like us, we've always thought of things in terms of groups or in terms of, oh, does the family want
Yeah.
this? So we've made decisions based on that, and we've stuck to smaller groups of people and respected
Yeah.
that. So, of course, they are that also comes down to risk averseness. How much of a risk are you willing to take? And if that
Yeah.
element is quite high, then you can go experiment and do these things. But if you think that no, I have a very clear path here. See, now there is this element also, right? In India or Asia in general, family businesses is a huge thing nobody talks about, but it's such a huge component where 70 to 90% of businesses are family businesses, and they work a certain way. In the US, it's not the case. In the US, the thought process is a lot different. And is your education going to support this in any way? You got to figure that out first. If not, if you're going there just to have fun and say that I just want to go abroad and show this fancy degree that I have,
Yeah.
then that's a call that you have to take, and you have to see whether that's going to help you in get the recognition that you want.
So, Ajitesh, when you hear a word like entrepreneurship, it is something which has been, I think, over exhausted by the algorithm. Either social media platforms or even anything you see around yourself, this word has been overutilized. Not to hurt anyone's sentiment, but there are some people who might be just attached to an initiative, but still they would like to call themselves entrepreneur. Like they might be a founder for a week, they are entrepreneurs without like going through that whole journey of hustle. And with that, actually, I wanted to ask that I think there are people who confuse money with fame, especially the Shark Tank example that you gave. That's like the most primary example of this. Before that, no one knew them. They had money, they had the power to get things done. So they utilized that capital and actually went there for their PR and then they became famous. So I think that differentiation is something that people don't understand. But overall, to you here, when you see things like this happening around the whole world of entrepreneurship, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think that is such a small aspect of entrepreneurship, and it
Yeah.
it has many faces, right? Entrepreneurship is, we often celebrate the success, we often look at news media and then we're like, oh, this company has got a unicorn tag, this company has raised 100 million or whatever, and then you think that's success. That's not. The problem is people have projected that as success, and people want that. And once you get into it, being, once you start doing things in a startup, you understand that these things are. One second. So yeah, once you start doing these things, you understand that there is this whole dark side to it, this side where it gets very lonely and you start questioning yourself whether you're doing the right thing, because you're doing something that you imagine and then nobody else can actually see. But then to get that whole ideation and execution done in order, it becomes a huge challenge. You feel like you're the only person up against the world. So it's one of the hardest things. That's one of the reasons why I say, don't get into it if you're not playing this for the long term. And don't get confused with fame, and if you want to use this as a marketing tool and say that let me figure this out to help me get some PR, then you can give it a shot and try whatever a lot of people have been doing, getting what do you call it, acceptance from media. That can work, but at the long term level, really depends how far it'll take you. And of course, fame, this whole fame thing is, it's sad, but people want it. People want it for the wrong reasons. In fact, people want to be entrepreneurs for the wrong reasons. They associate or equate entrepreneurship to, oh, I'm going to be famous. That's such a wrong way of looking at things. There are a lot of entrepreneurs. There are so many successful companies where you wouldn't find them anywhere in the media, doing just quiet work, and then they're doing superbly. And ideally, we would all want to be that, because in a world like today, you want that privacy, and at the same time, you want all the good things, right? So I think that's something that you should always strive for, even if you are trying to do something in the sector of raising your own capital or building a small business or whatever it is. But students, young, the Generation Z, all these guys should not look into it with the wrong lens and say that, oh, I want to start a business. Because suddenly they feel like, oh, I can do it because somebody else has done it. And then they talk to their friends and let's start a company tomorrow. I have this idea. And if you can...
That's a Instagram reel that everyone wants to share.
Yeah, I mean, that's sadly the reality, right? Like, people think it's so easy. And then they start something without 100% conviction that it's actually something. And then, like you said, right, you build something and it fails, but then you're still like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, I've done this, I've done that. The facade. So look beyond the facade.
And I think even the most major point here is that these people don't understand that once you have become famous and you are rich as well, people are going to expect always that you are rich. And then that's going to be a problem for you. There have been multiple examples in our own history where we have seen people who might not be having that much of money that they used to have, but because people know them, they have to put out PR like that. They have to show their richness. But at the end, it's not real. It's rental or just to give an illusion that they are rich.
It's all perception, and it's fake marketing, and sadly people fall for it, especially the average 18-year-old thinks that, oh, this is the way to get rich, or I just need to do this for the next 3 months or 6 months and I'm going to make a lot of money. They capitalize on their naivety and then they say that, okay, let's make money out of them through these courses or through these mechanisms. And It's like you get your fingers burnt and then you realize.
So, next thing I really wanted to talk about leadership, right? So, again, this is a keyword. This keyword though is like a golden keyword. Like, you will find this in every motivational speaker's brochure. You will find this in every so-called life coaches you see nowadays on Instagram. Their keywords are or their bio. But overall, I was reading a data by NCRT. It was saying that there are only 20% of schools overall in India which are uh, actually, doing things which leads to leaderships, or your things like this, school councils and stuff. That too, think is a fake part of leadership. You eventually realize that sooner or later. But when you see overall leadership inculcated with education, how do you see to execute that in a pragmatic way?
That's a very good question, because leadership will not just happen by doing a course. It's not
Hmm.
something that, oh, I'll do this and then overnight I expect my students or
Yeah.
anybody to become leaders. And like you
Hmm.
said, it actually starts at the root. It starts at the school level. It
Yeah.
starts so early that, are you giving children the right opportunities? Are you helping them make those mistakes and grow? What kind of
Hmm.
programs are you actually including? Great, you're teaching NCRT textbooks and you're following a certain curriculum. But beyond that, what are you actually doing to ensure that your students or your children are actually showing these capabilities? And there is also this wrong notion, right? When you say leadership, it doesn't necessarily mean the CEO, and then you can be a leader at any level. Like, you don't have to have that title per se. Uh,
Hmm.
the association of a title and leadership, there are many people who are bosses, but then they're not great leaders. You don't, yeah,
Certainly.
so you don't really have to have that title with you to feel like you're a leader. I think it comes
Hmm.
from a lot of initiation, it comes from
Hmm.
keeping people at the center of things, and it also comes from you not being the whole and sole universe of everything. I think with these aspects, it starts from school, right? You learn about these things, you learn how to talk to your friends, you learn the importance of negotiation, and you learn uh, critical thinking, you learn how to actually be patient and listen. Listening is a skill that most people don't have, and everyone
Ouch.
likes to talk, but how many of them? Yeah, it's sadly the
Yeah.
truth, right? Like, how much listening do you do in a day versus talking?
Well, though it's to my job profile that has taught me to listen to people. But certainly, if I was not in this, I think I would have been a very bad listener. We eventually all of us are.
Yeah, because you have to be a little conscious, right? Like,
Yeah.
it requires a bit of effort.
Yeah.
It's very easy to speak, and you can speak crap also for hours, but then to
Yeah.
listen is and to absorb is a whole different game. So these skills are actually something that I think schools and colleges, institutions should teach, and not necessarily the the things that we see in the front. Oh, are you going on the stage and talking? These are all
Hmm.
great things. These help you with confidence. But
Hmm.
when you say leadership, there are different kinds of leaders. But one common thing is you have to listen. You can be
Hmm.
this extroverted, flamboyant leader who's up there, but at the same time, you can be this calm leader who really doesn't do these things but looks at work as a more process oriented thing and keeps people in the front. So you have to see what fits you, and I think at various levels, right? The
Hmm.
earlier you start, the more you realize the kind of a leader you are, and then you figure out, okay, this is probably not my thing, or this is
Hmm.
something that I'm really good at, and you leverage from there. And there is no formula for this. It's such a tricky thing, because
Yeah.
we do leadership development and all of these things. People want more leadership related programs, but then you have to see where you are at and then whether it's the right thing for you.
Certainly, certainly it is. I cannot name people here, but certainly I have seen people who are terrible listeners and they are literally writing in bold words how to be like a good leader, and listening to people is a skill that they can teach. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that happens. Overall, Ajitesh, concluding this conversation here, one last thing that I would like really love to know from you. When I see a person like you who has corporate experience as well, has people management experience as well, and overall teaching, which is the main genre here, that as well. So, overall, when you see your journey or the things that you have taken, the roads that have led to the place where you are at the moment, what is the biggest learning that you have learned so far?
Oh man, there's so many. There's so many things. I feel I'm learning every day.
Any one thing that stick with
So
you?
one of yeah, I think this year for me particularly was a little different. I feel don't rush the process
Mm-hmm.
and kind of I like what you have behind you. It says enjoy the little things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It does.
That's kind of been it's been a big reminder for me to be more mindful of the present. As good as it is to plan a lot and execute and whatever hustle and all of that, I think when you take it way too seriously, you lose your way somewhere and then you forget what's in front of you. So I think that's been a very big lesson for me in terms of doing things, and things take time, and enjoy that process and enjoy the ride, because that's what kind of makes things more memorable, and those are the things that you actually live for, right? Not the final product or whatever.